Hi there. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. How are you? Of
I'm great, thanks, sir. Thanks very much for speaking to me.
course.
Very, very nice, very nice. I love that cover. I mean, I've not actually physically had it in my hands, but I love the cover. Is it quite tactile? It looks quite tactile,
Yeah,
the silk and stuff. Yeah,
it's got like all shiny effects on it. It's pretty
yeah,
cool. Of
that's great. Well, yeah, thanks so much for your time, and thanks so much
course. Thanks for having me.
for having me palpitate with your anxiety-inducing book. It's fantastic. I loved it to bits.
Thank you.
I'm surprised. I mean, it really took me on a ride because I mean, I don't want to go too deep into, it, but I've suffered anxiety and OCD ever since I can remember. So this
Right.
really kind of took me down the rabbit hole, and
Close to
it
home.
really kind of resonated with me in a big way, but in a good way, in a cathartic way in the end, I think. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
So I'm quite curious. I mean, I don't want to spoil the specific plot points, but kind of like this house, the caretaker job takes place at, very much kind of leans into rules that are very kind of reminiscent to OCD. So I'm quite curious. Was that kind of like the light bulb moment? Was that what you wanted to kind of create kind of an analogy of a haunting stroke rituals that kind of mirrored OCD in a way to really kind of
For,
create that kind of anxiety that an OCD sufferer would go through or goes through.
yeah. Yeah, I always say it's a very thinly veiled metaphor for OCD. And it's something that I myself was diagnosed with quite recently, but obviously
Right.
I'd lived through it my entire life, and I think a lot of that came from just not understanding how complex of a disorder it actually is and how wildly it can vary. I think most representation is it's usually around symmetry or cleanliness or that kind of thing, but there's so many variants, there's so many offshoots, and so I would say it kind of just inevitably became an OCD metaphor. And um, yeah, it just that's just how it ended up being, and a lot of my own experiences in there as well. Not the exact OCD things that I deal with personally, but
Yeah.
the adjacent to that.
Uh-huh. But at the same time, it's almost kind of there is some kind of satire. They're very self-aware meta satire at the same time. So I'm guessing that this really served as a kind of a catharsis for you as well at the same time to kind of to laugh in the face of your OCD at the same time. If you kind of those things that you kind of you have gone through, have been through, or you are
Yeah,
going through.
yeah, it's very cathartic in that sense to just kind of get it on the page. And like actually wrote the majority of this book when I was going through a pretty intense bout of OCD. You know, when you fall into those spirals and everything, and it's really hard to get out of.
Yeah.
And in a way, writing this book kind of helped get me out of that rut of it was something else to focus on other than the compulsions and all that. So yeah, very cathartic, and it's been especially rewarding to hear people such as yourself relating to it as well.
But no, I mean,
I mean, yeah,
like I said, I really related to it, but in a good way. You know, it kind of
totally.
it made me feel understood and not alone, which was something that people that don't usually read horror or don't like to watch horror movies, they don't understand why. But things like this kind of really make me appreciate at least why horror is so cathartic, so helpful to me because it makes me feel. I mean, there's so many characters that are flawed, and they had the same kind of flaws that and like you said, you weren't even aware of your OCD to start with. And these kind of books help people realize that they're not alone, and maybe they are going through certain things. And it was really cathartic in that way for me. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think horror is a perfect genre to explore mental health in general, but specifically OCD adjacent stuff because I feel like so much representation of OCD, it's either a punchline or it's presented as something that's kind of quirky and
Yeah,
cute and it's like a weird but for most people dealing with it, it's like it's a literal nightmare, and it can completely take over your life. And so I hope that that aspect of it was represented, even if, like I say, it's a thinly veiled metaphor. I didn't want it to be one to one because obviously uh, the delusions in OCD aren't actually real usually,
Yeah.
whereas in this case they may or may not be. So yeah,
Yeah, and maybe I overread it just because I kind
no, no, no,
of
not at
suffered it
all.
a lot. But yeah, it definitely shone through very brightly for me anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely. I even put it. I think if you read an early version at the beginning, there's a note from the author, and in the early version it doesn't say OCD, and then in the final book it does mention OCD as one of the things. Because I
Yeah.
was like debating if whether or not I wanted to be open about it,
Right.
and I had so many people saying like you should probably put an OCD content warning for this, and so I was like, yeah, yeah. So I ended up
Uh-huh.
putting it in the final book.
Uh-huh.
So yeah,
Brilliant. So I mean, so yeah, so talking. I mean, you said there about what kind of warnings and trigger warnings and things like that. I always like to ask the writers because it's very typical that they'll include an epigraph at the beginning of the book, for whatever reason, whether it's because they have couldn't afford another one or whatever.
right.
So I'm quite curious. I mean, the epigraph at the beginning of Yon is by an unknown person. It said the child cast out of the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. So I'm just kind of curious if you could kind of explain why you wanted to set the tone with that specific phrase, that quote.
It's just an ominous quote that I've heard so many times before, and like it's impossible to find the actual sourcing. I've seen things saying it was an African proverb. I've seen other things saying it was like from something else. Like it's really hard to find. It literally is unknown, like as to who came up with it. And I think like thematically and socially, the book is very much, for me at least, there's this core underlying social pressure of what happens to people when there isn't social safety nets to catch them. And I try not to be too overtly political, especially on the page, because I feel like, um, well, it's inevitable. Everything's going to be political no matter what. But I
Yeah.
find for the character of the book, I don't want to inject my own point of view onto that character. I want the
Yeah.
reader to be able to kind of fill in those blanks. But ultimately, that's kind of what it's about. Like, if you don't take care of people that are in crisis, your entire society can kind of crumble. And that's like a math. That's a empirical fact. Like, you look at societies where there's wildly differing inequality, and they tend to be, the wider those gaps get, the more unstable that society becomes. And so I think thematically and from a social perspective, that's the reason I chose to open with it. And it's just an ominous, uh, really just, I really love that quote. It's just really well
Uh-huh.
crafted,
I'm curious that you
reverberating.
mentioned kind of you didn't want to get too kind of political with it. Not once did I feel like the book was particularly preachy in any way, which is like you said, you don't like to get too kind of political. Because for me anyway, it really kind of pulls me out of the story if things become too preachy or too explanatory. Um, is that something you find yourself maybe second guessing just to make sure that it doesn't get too preachy? Even like you said, you didn't want it to be too on the nose in terms of OCD. Being someone who suffers OCD, I imagine that you do second guess a lot of the things that
Oh,
you write in
yeah,
your books as well.
all
No,
the time.
kind of goes hand in hand. No.
Yeah. It's a very constant thing that I'm always gauging. And I think I think for me, a lot of media now, I find you can almost hear the writers patting themselves on the back a little bit, even
Yeah.
stuff I love. And I really don't like that. I think you can be, first of all, if you don't hear that patting on the back, it's going to be much more persuasive and effective to people that might not have the same views as you on a topic. If a person is reading something and it feels like, oh, this is just like a straw man of what I believe, um, it just kind of unnecessarily alienates people. And that being said, there's still tons of art that does that, that is very overtly political, that is fantastic, and that is also a necessary thing in some mediums and in some forms. But for me, and my personal taste and how I like to approach these topics, I find it to just be much more interesting and nuanced to kind of play with different angles and make it feel like more organic to the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
yeah, completely. Yeah.
in a way, by not being, that is a choice as well. Being apolitical is a very political choice, and I don't consider myself apolitical at all. But I guess like withdrawing from explicitly being political is kind of in itself a political
Yeah.
stance. If that makes sense, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't study this topic, but yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Uh-huh. So, I mean, specifically for this book, was there anything? I mean, I don't want you to give anything away, but was there anything that you found yourself kind of going down a rabbit hole, and you're like, no, we got to stop this. We can't go down this. I don't want to take it that way. In
Yeah, I
terms of
mean
kind
it.
of politically speaking, or kind of thematically about the OCD and those kind of things.
Yeah, I think the book ended up being a lot darker than I expected it, especially when it comes to things about depression and self-harm and that kind of stuff. And so I kept kind of, there's a certain chapter in particular that is very, very dark on that topic and very, I guess, graphic. And
Yeah.
I was constantly being like, oh, is this too much? And I would kind of dial it back and then go back again. And I find it a difficult chapter to go back and read. So honestly, I don't know if I went too far or not.
Right.
Maybe I did, but it's very it's an important topic to me, and it's also one that I feel like is often misrepresented or underrepresented
Right.
in media. And so yeah, that in particular was something I debated on a lot.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm picking up on the exact thing that you're talking about, but one of my questions that I've got for you is that I was just the other week I was speaking. I don't know if you've read Eric LaRocca's Wretch, his
No,
latest book, and he tackles suicide beautifully because it's kind of there's one of the characters is going through a really tough period and thinking about suicide, but curiosity rather than killing the cat, he finds curiosity. He finds kind of feels himself rejuvenated because of certain curiosities that he still has that kind of keep him grasping to stay alive. And what I really took from your book as well is the fact that you emphasize a lot about having to find a purpose in life to kind of it changes everything. No matter, and he says, no matter how little or small that thing is, as long as it's got a meaning for you, then it gives you kind of a reason to strive and to carry on, which was something that I really appreciated in this book.
yeah, and I think that is when people feel like there's no other option, they generally feel like there is no reason or thing to keep them going. And so it's like you said, it could be something super small. And um I just know for people going through that, it's like whatever people say, it's just so you feel like you're at the bottom of a pit and there's like nothing that can get you out of it. And so sometimes it's just as simply as seeing like, okay, other people have gone through this and they pulled through. Um, at the very least, you feel a little less alone, you know? So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. Brilliant. I'm guessing that was what you were hinting towards, no? When you
yeah,
mentioned that you, yeah.
yeah,
Okay. So I mean, on a much lighter note, I want to talk a little about you created your own kind of set of rules, which is kind of like the core of the story. Is this great set of rules, which I don't want to spoil at all. And there is a specific mention of the film Gremlins, which I'm guessing was
yeah.
a big inspiration for the idea for you to set rules. It also kind of reminded me of The Ring because there's even a VHS tape that one of the characters plays with the rules on there. Um, I'm quite curious. Was Gremlins kind of the inspiration behind those rules? Where did those rules come from? And then how did you approach those rules? Because I know that Joe Dante, he kind of, especially in Gremlins 2, he kind of self-parodied himself
Right.
because those rules had so many flaws in them. So how did you kind of go about creating these rules? And I don't know whether you were that bothered about them being very flawless, if you will.
I think the first Gremlins, I can't remember what age I was when I first watched it, but me and my sisters couldn't even like finish it. We were so
So scared of
scared
it.
because
Yeah,
yeah, I don't it's an even watching it today, it's like, man, this is an intense movie for like what's a family kind of film ultimately.
yeah,
Like she puts one of those things in the microwave and stabs it with a knife and all that.
And I think Gremlins, it just obviously inspired me because I saw it at such a young age, and I've seen the full film now, obviously. And then there's also a bit of defensiveness putting that reference in there, where I feel like the rules genre, especially on where I kind of got my start, which is on Reddit.
Yeah.
The rules genre is one of the most popular genres, to the point where people almost roll their eyes on that subreddit when it's like, oh, it's another rules story kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so, in a way, me putting Gremlins in that was to be like, this is all horror stories or rule stories, and like it's kind of, it's what it is at the end of the day. Like most, whether it's hidden in a list or whether it's hidden in the monster, like there's always, don't do this, don't do that, why X Y Z.
Uh-huh.
And then for me, the types of rules that always kind of grab me are ones that seem kind of innocuous at first glance. I mean,
Right.
obviously, without spoiling anything, but like the one involving, I will just say, involves lights, and like that
Right.
one in particular, it was heavily inspired by the first Paranormal Activity, which again,
Okay.
people meme and make fun of that movie now, and they did at the time as well. But in a vacuum, it's quite an extraordinary film. It was shot for, I believe, $20,000, and it made 250,000 times that budget in box office. Not that
Right.
that is a marker of success. And it's really doing very, very little. Most of it is just shots of an empty bedroom, and
Yeah.
your eyes are just darting between what's going to happen next. And again, if you watch that movie with the right set of mind and you're not watching it in a loud party environment, it can really get under your skin, to the point where just simply seeing a light turning on at the end of the hall can really kind of send chills down your spine.
Yeah.
And there's something to me that is so much more, the way that movie did lights turning on specifically was so creepy to me, because normally it's the monster, everything goes dark, right? And then the monster gets you because you don't
Yeah.
see it. But the idea of a monster that is, it's turning a light on, it's like, that's creepy to me. It's like it wants you to see it or something. Like what, it's, this
Yeah.
goes against the grain. And so I really, that little thing of the light I kind of use for all of my horror in general, is kind of taking what might be expected or what we might be used to, and then just kind of twisting it a tiny little
Twisting it a
bit.
bit. Yeah.
So yeah, it's still a trope, but
Uh-huh.
that little new angle gets it under the skin. And
Uh-huh.
um,
Just as a side
yeah,
note,
it's
when you mentioned the Paranormal Activity, have you seen The Undertone, which is just released? I think it's The Undertone
no,
over there.
I've
If
got
you
to see.
love Paranormal Activity, you have to see that because there's so much of
Okay,
those kind of very very simple things that you don't expect, and there's kind of plenty lots of bare frame that gets you kind of
cool.
looking everywhere to see what's going on, and you're kind of focusing on the sound, but at the same time trying to. There's so much not going on that makes you kind of hyper aware and hyper vigilant of the whole screen at the same time. It's fantastic. You love
It's,
it.
yeah, I love that. It's so effective. Another movie that does that is the Invisible Man remake.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah,
It's funny. I was just
yeah,
speaking to the director of uh, Undertone yesterday, and I mentioned that it reminded me a little bit of the Invisible Man. Yeah, because it kind of plays with the space
totally.
that there's
Yeah.
nothing there, and yeah, I mentioned exactly. Yeah,
And
the
you're,
exact same
where
thing.
is it going to show up? And then you see the knife slide off the
Exactly. Yeah.
counter. And yeah, it just, uh, yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I'm heavily inspired by, I'm almost more inspired by movies than I am books, because I'm reading a lot more now, but I had a huge break in my like mid 20s where I barely read at all because my attention span was so just ruined.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, I get the same as well. Yeah, I go through kind of the stages where I try and sit down and read, and I know exactly what you mean, and I can't focus and kind of I forget the names and everything, just kind of, so I just have to take a break every so often. Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. Uh-huh. Brilliant. And you mentioned there the kind of the rules and what people mustn't do. Sorry, yes, yeah. What people mustn't do, the rules that people mustn't do. Whereas this book, without giving it away, is what they have to do, which kind of
yeah,
that was also kind of a spin on those rules. Was that very intentional as well?
yeah. And I mean, that's definitely, I can't not give credit to No Sleep and creepypastas and online horror in general, because that genre in particular just has exploded in the last 4 or 5 years. And it is just so compelling because immediately it's just like, okay, what would I do in this situation? And then I think it also ties somewhat nicely into the idea of having a job, because it's a story about jobs and employment, and that's what you have to do, and this is what you're supposed to do when this happens, and we're going to pay you at the end of the day, and if you mess up, well, you could end up losing your job or getting disciplined and all that. And so it's just an easy metaphor to tie into what I wanted it to tie into.
Mm-hmm. Then I want to talk a little about kind of the protagonist of the story who takes on this job as the caretaker. Macy, she's hyper OCD. That's not a spoiler.
Yeah.
That kind of plays into everything that happens when she gets to the house and all these rules and everything. It's kind of her OCD exacerbates to to the nth degree. But I'm quite curious, how did you make it believable that someone so young would take on this kind of a job and then would kind of buy into all of that stuff? Because I love supernatural stories, but only if they're really, really grounded in something that we can believe. Because if it's not grounded in reality, I usually kind of get lost in the plot, and it doesn't really kind of pull me in. But this one really pulled me in because the characters were so grounded, and we were so kind of, you focus so much inside Macy's head that it made it really, really kind of authentic and believable. So I'm quite curious how you approached making sure that it was grounded enough, and the reader could kind of follow Macy's journey into this house and into believing what she initially kind of believes shouldn't be believed, and she shouldn't kind of think that way.
Yeah, I think for me, like the main crux of any haunted or cursed house story is like, why don't they just leave? That's what every reader, like, why don't they just leave? Why don't they just call the police? So on and so on. And in this case, it wasn't just why wouldn't she leave? It's why would she go there in the first place?
Exactly, yeah.
And a lot of the book, to the point where it might be almost too much, is like very early on is setting up how dire their situation is financially. And so for me, as somebody who spent most of my 20s, kind of month paycheck to paycheck, having that thing where you tap the card and basically have a panic attack because you're just waiting for the approved to come by, and like all that is from my own personal experience. And it just, the first thing is the money. So like it had to be an amount of money that felt that you couldn't say no to it, and for a job that she's doing. And that kind of, like, people do hits for less money than what she makes on the job,
Right. Yeah.
That's always so people that saying like, I wouldn't do this for that amount of money. It's like, well, people do crazier things for far, far less money in even less desperate situations.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing. And then I think the OCD connection metaphor, that helps. There's a moment where she sort of, without spoiling anything too much, I guess she makes a decision to just stay for sure, let's say, when she's kind of teetering. And it kind of is all mostly internal. And that's very much like an OCD coded thing, where it's like whatever compulsion the person has, you can like externally know that it's crazy and out there, and still just have to do it, And so I think that's kind of where it goes for her by the end. And so that, I'm very much like you. Like, I love supernatural horror, but I like trying to ground it as much as possible, not only because it's more believable, but because I find it personally a lot scarier. A quote I always, and I don't condone, or I haven't even seen any of his films, but it's a guy named Eli Roth, and he had a quote. I don't remember the exact quote, but he was talking about how for violence in films. Like when you show somebody's arm get blown off or their leg get eaten up by a monster, that can be entertaining, but it's generally most people don't know what it feels like to have their arm blown off. But if you show somebody's, like a hangnail getting pulled up the finger, like in Black Swan, or an Achilles tendon getting hit, everybody knows what that feels like. And they could just imagine, oh, what would more of that feel like? And so I kind of take that as another thing with the light switch thing, and I try to apply it to everything, not just violence, but just scares and everything. It's like, okay, everybody, like setting, let's say. So the house is it's a 2-story rancher. In early versions, it was a big, mega modern mansion. Right. And I think scaling it down and making it feel more intimate and more relatable is just immediately scarier to more people, because most people have been inside a 2-story rancher or they've seen a house like that. Yeah. But very few people, myself included, have been inside a mega modern super mansion. Those can be fun settings, and I want to do stuff like that. But yeah, the more relatable, the more grounded, the scarier it is to me.
Yeah, especially in a book as well. Obviously, if you have like a modern house in a movie, you've got it there right in front of you. You can kind of picture it, but in a book, it makes so much more sense, like you said, to kind of set it in a more familiar setting, no?
Totally. And just one more thing on that too. I would say the movie Parasite, the Korean film,
right,
is massively influential on me as well. And one of the things that did so well, tying back to like hearing writers pat themselves on the back, is I find a lot of time when you have like lower class versus upper class, it's just very, very cut and dry. Like the rich people are always jerks, they're super snobby, but that's not, like most people that are wealthy are very, very nice and very pleasant. And like, and that to me, it's just more interesting and it's more nuanced. And it's just like, Grace is obviously prickly and strange, but she's not a horrible person. And in Parasite, they do that just so effectively, where the family is very polite, very kind, and it just all politics aside, it's just a more interesting story to me to have that. Yeah.
And so I think felt something that really helped ground it as well was the fact that Macy's got a sister who's not with her, but there's certain kind of, they're in contact with each other. We'll leave it at that. But she also she provides kind of not just the groundedness, but also some levity and some kind of meta humor in there, which is almost, I can't remember the exact phrase it was. It was really popcorn thinking or popcorn
popcorn commentary. Yeah, I think it was
something
popcorn
like that.
Commentary.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So like she come up with phrases that would be typical, like don't say that or don't do that in a horror movie and those kind of things. So
yeah,
did you specifically create this, that her sister, and have her kind of providing this kind of popcorn dialogue to bring levity and to kind of ground what was going on in the house as much as possible? Like, I think for the same reason.
Yeah, for the same reason. And then I think also there is a defensive, I feel like I'm a defensive writer sometimes, where I'm like, I almost want to, like, I know what is going to annoy people and what people are going to be like, why did the character do that? And so I like giving a voice to those readers as much as possible. Like, then Gemma kind of was that, where she'd be like, you idiot, don't go into the whatever and all that. And then also to advocate for Macy, because there's a lot of times where the example I use is this, like you're in your house alone, you hear a creepy sound in the basement. In a horror movie, you leave the house, obviously. But in real life, people explain away a lot of things. Like they're not going to call the police, because even if like they go downstairs and their table is in a different spot, they might leave the house, but they're going to come back eventually. And so I think having Gemma's voice provides that kind of counterbalance to like advocate for the audience, but then also push back against. It's almost me fighting with myself and the audience in a way.
But I'm guessing it was maybe from a personal experience as well. You kind of maybe, I don't know if you got siblings or whatever, but kind of like you said, you suffer with OCD. I know that I've had conversations with my sisters like, don't be stupid. There's nothing to worry about, whatever. And I'm guessing some of that came from kind of a personal space as
Totally.
well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I have two siblings and we joke around a lot, and so that
right.
kind of that a lot of that is from my own relationships with them and with friends and stuff, like the whole making fun of movies and kind of adding when we're bored of a movie, just adding our own dialogue to like kind of spice it up and that kind of thing. So yeah.
At the same time, this question, I like asking this question to writers. It's impossible not to write certain kind of traits and things of either yourself or especially of kind of people that you know. Are you very kind of self-aware when you're writing and you maybe include things of your friends or your family or whatever, and you kind of think, oh, maybe they'll spot it if they read that, and kind of you change it so it's not too obvious that you kind of parodying or writing about someone that you're close
Right.
to.
I think generally I try to avoid that, but it's like definitely inevitable
Sure.
to slip in some way. But I think that well, like I'll use a name or something, and then I'm like, oh wait, that's my like my cousin's kid's name or
Right.
something. I don't want them to think I'm writing about their kids, so I'll like have to. I have a lot of cousins, so that's a lot of names to keep track of. So yeah, I'm definitely cognizant of that. Like I have a friend, the David Carnswell. I have a friend, a very close friend of mine, is named David,
Right.
and he hasn't read the book yet, but I need to like tell him. I'll be like, hey, just so you know, I just use this name because it's like a strong sounding name. It's not connected to you. Not that that's a bad character or anything, but yeah, it's just
Yeah.
sometimes I just really like the sound of the name, so I'll let that person know it's just the name. It's not based on you or anything like that. But
Uh-huh. And kind of coupled to that, I'm quite curious. Some writers don't, they're very, very protective of their writing, and they don't even show family members until it's come out. A lot of people, a lot of authors that spoken to, they're like, no, my husband's not even read it until he's not going to read it until it's come out, and those kind of things. How protective of you of your kind of your writing process? Do you have any brainstorming with kind of friends, family to
I
help you through
use
that process, or do you prefer to kind of keep it as isolated as possible until the book actually comes out?
I have a very small circle of close friends and a cousin of mine and one of my siblings that they read early drafts, but I'd say it's probably like no more than like 5 to 7 people total that read it before it comes out. Um, and those people are invaluable. They're people that I really trust, and it feels very vulnerable and weird to share something, especially when it's not finished,
Yeah.
because it's especially when it's such a personal story. So I definitely I'm opening up more and more because I think it's important to have outside perspective because they're just going to be able to catch things and see plot holes and point out where you can do something better that you're just never going to be able to see. And so having that close relationship with people that I trust is important. But in general, I'm very private and to the point where like most of my family, I was writing anonymously online for many years,
All
like
right.
like the Reddit stories and all that. And so only like my closest friends even knew. And I was just very worried about what my family might think or all that. And so I've
Uh,
gotten over that for sure.
yeah, but can I ask you exactly why you were worried what people might think about what you'd written?
I think I always felt growing up religious, I always felt like
Right.
writing horror was like, even though I loved horror movies and talked openly about loving horror movies, there still felt like this part of me that felt like it was an immoral thing to write.
Kind of a taboo subject for yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, watching more and more horror, like Jordan Peele in particular, and seeing like it can actually be a very therapeutic and um, responsible way to explore some pretty serious topics
Yeah.
made me kind of realize that no, this isn't immoral. It's definitely not for everyone, and I completely like I like extreme metal music and I completely understand why people don't, you know?
Right.
And it's the
Sure.
same thing with horror. Like when people
Yeah.
don't like it, I guess where it got personal for me is where people would go so far as to be like, whether it was a religious perspective, they'd be like, oh, this is evil, this is demonic, or even a political perspective where people would be like, well, this is exploitative. You shouldn't be writing about this kind of stuff. Like it's minimizing real world trauma and stuff. And a lot of that was an OCD kind of moral quandary as well of like, oh, I can't do this, it's immoral, and it's people are gonna, whatever can happen will happen, and people are gonna judge me. And so getting over that, it was a huge thing. I didn't get over it until I was like 28, and the only reason I did get over it was because like um the like opportunities starting to open up to me where it would be professionally published. I'm like, well, I can't really hide anymore. So yeah, I was kind of forced into it to come out.
So, but can I ask you specifically why you decided to write horror in the first place? Because, like you said, that it felt almost kind of taboo to start with. What was kind of the spark that made you decide that you wanted to write some episodic horror on Reddit?
I think I've always been fascinated with the genre from a very young age, especially like I wasn't allowed to watch it when I was quite young. I mean, like even at a reasonable age, obviously you don't want like a 6-year-old watching The Shining or something like that.
Yeah.
But even older, it just kind of like, even when I was like, I could kind of do it, I felt like you're not supposed to do this for so long. And that kind of gave it a forbidden fruit aspect of like, oh man, like, it's like the thing I say with weed. The second weed became legalized, it became less fun for me. Like it's just like, oh well, now this is everyone's allowed to do it, and there was something about that, like, oh, we're literally breaking the
100%.
law right now. Like we could get in trouble for this, and like, and so there's that forbidden fruit element that always drew it to me, and then it just comes easier to me than any other genre, and I just really enjoy it. And now I've embraced that. Like I've now like learned, like, you know what, like people read this genre to be scared, and it's fun to scare people that want to be scared, like that's it's a fun genre to explore, and it's in a safe way, like it's like
Exactly.
yeah, it's completely harmless.
Talking of scares, I mean, I don't say this lightly. This has by far given me the most anxiety of a horror book that I've read so far this year. Obviously, I don't want to explain why, but there's a specific technique that you use in there. I don't want to give it away. Let's see if I can reveal it to you without giving it away. Let's just say it gave me palpitations. And I thought it was gonna. It felt like it could be a gimmick at first, but the more I got into it, and the more I continued reading, the faster my pulse rate got. Let's just leave it at that. So I think you know what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah.
I'm guessing that specific technique that you included in there was specifically to kind of really ramp up the tension for the readers, right?
Yeah, that came, I know exactly what you're talking about.
You know what I'm
I
talking
think,
about.
yeah, I think like, well, this book takes place in the same universe as my other one, We Used to Live Here. And so there is just like an entire background headcanon I have for this universe that I just keep building and keep adding to it. And that moment in particular where, I guess a scare is tied to a certain, I guess, emotion or physical tick. It just very much feels like it brings the reader into it. And there's a game called, it's slipping from me. I can't remember the name, but it's a game where like the controllers on the PlayStation have like emotion. And so when the monster is coming to find you, you have to hold the controller perfectly still. And if you move outside of that, it'll jump on you, kind of thing. And I like kind of finding ways to make the reader think about things like that, whether it's, holding your breath or other things. And it's kind of makes it unintentionally interactive.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I mean that kind of makes me think about when I said to you that there's certain, like you said, there's certain moments where you just find that you can't concentrate and get into a book. But that technique that you used was one of the most immersive things that I've read for a long, long time. It really works so, so well. At first, I thought it might be just a kind of a gimmicky thing because it sounds gimmicky. I don't want to
Right.
say what it is, but
Yeah.
it works so, so well. It was just so good.
Yeah. I think too, I think I do write for people. I'm the same. I lose track of characters so easily. Like if I get more, I need when I'm reading a book, I need to actually write down all the character names with
Yeah, I'm
descriptions.
the same. When
Yeah,
I'm preparing
yeah,
questions, I got to write down notes
yeah.
and the
This
names, the surnames,
character,
who's this and
yeah,
who's
and
that. Otherwise, I just forget it completely. Yeah.
even in the middle of reading. And so I try to make that as easy as possible. And one of that is just simply not having that many characters. Like there is
Yeah.
it's really just Macy for most of the book by herself. And so I think that helps. And then yeah, yeah.
No, but no, it works fantastic. Yeah, obviously, I don't want to give anything away, but it was just something that, as simple as it is, it just works so, so well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. So, also, I know that there was it was announced that Sydney Sweeney was attached for an adaptation of this book. So before I read it, I kind of had her in my mind, and I was like, I don't want a person's face in my mind.
Yeah.
And because you managed to get so into Macy's mindset, I didn't even remember Sydney Sweeney was involved at all until afterwards.
I'm the same way. Like I find one of the most special things about reading is you kind of create a world that's all your own. Like everyone's experience is complete. Like if you were to create a movie of what you saw in your head while you watched it, be completely different from a different reader's.
Yeah.
And as cool as movie adaptations are and all that, it almost forces you generally to imagine that. Like now, even Lord of the Rings, like one of my favorite books, it's almost impossible not to
Not to
imagine.
think about.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
thankfully those are great movies, but yeah, um,
Uh-huh.
it's an
No,
interesting relationship.
no, but I was just quite curious what you think of thought of it because it must be. I mean, I've spoken to certain authors who they include artwork inside the books, and I asked them, is is that a benefit? Because I kind of, for me, a writer, it's it plays to their benefit that the reader creates the kind of the faces and kind of imagines what these people are like. So I mean, knowing that this book was going to come out after all this news about Sydney Sweeney and whatnot, I was kind of, like I said, I was concerned that I was going to pigeonhole her as
Right.
Macy, and I don't know if that it was something that you did afterwards to make sure that didn't happen, or was as the book is the book pretty much as it was intended before all
It
that news
was,
came out.
yeah, I'm like so separate from Hollywood and like by choice, I'm just like Hollywood do your thing and then I'll do my thing over here. And
Uh-huh.
I try not to like, I think when everything initially kind of took off, it was almost overwhelming because I would start now I'm thinking, oh, now it's not only my friends and family reading this, it's like Hollywood movie stars, Hollywood directors, like
Yeah.
directors I looked up to my entire life are reading these stories and passing or accepting them, and so I think I just learned to like let go of all that and just be
Yeah.
like that's over there and this is over here, and so just very, yeah, separation of church and state, I guess.
Uh-huh. But at the same time, when you said that you kind of you keep things separate, these books you've said are in the same universe.
Yeah.
Um, why specifically did you decide I mean that's kind of laying down kind of a gauntlet for yourself because it's kind of in a way pigeonholing yourself. Um, why did you specifically decide to set them in the same universe?
I just
For what intention?
I love world building probably more than love even like crafting narrative. Like just I love fantasy and I love I love like being able to go to YouTube, for example, and find a channel about Song of Ice and Fire, and it's 700 videos just about the lore of
Yeah.
this world. You know,
Yeah.
like that. This is a person that is literally paying their mortgage just making videos about one author's world. And
Yeah.
if I could do something like that, where like in the future I could look to YouTube and there's people that have their entire living is just making lore videos about something I've written, that would just be
Yeah.
so cool. And so it's very satisfying to just, I like building things. So it feels like I'm just adding little bits. But I'm also very, like you said about being pigeonholed, I'm very intentional to, I guess, avoid the, mar- uh, I'm always mentioning Marvel. I don't want to shit on Marvel all the time because I feel like it's kicking a dead horse. And
Feel
Marvel's
free
done
to.
some, they've done some fantastic things, like
Yeah.
WandaVision. There's some amazing stuff that they're still doing. Um, I've heard Wonder Man is great as well. But one of the problems, and Disney has admitted as much, is it's become like you look at that and you're like, man, I got to watch 20 different TV shows, five
Yeah.
different
To
movies
know
to
what's going on. Yeah.
understand this character. And so I don't want to do that either. I want it to be like you can read We Used to Live Here on its own, and you can read Caretaker. You can read them in either order. And if you're very attentive, you might notice a few little connections here or there, but it's not mandatory. And I think that's important. I think Stephen King does that very well. Like you could read with the exception of some that are direct sequels, obviously,
Yeah.
uh, they're all part of the same universe, but they all stand alone as independent works very well. And it's just fun. I just like doing it. Like that's
Yeah, sure.
ultimately
But
the
I mean,
answer.
it must be, but at the same time, it must be so complicated because I mean, how do you keep it all mapped out? Do you have kind of cork boards all over the place, or how do you? Because
I
to keep
have
things out in the same universe, I mean, obviously, it's also great to create a universe and then let the readers, like you said, like let the readers go wild and come up with their own crazy ideas of how things could be joined together. But is there any kind of specific ways that you make sure that these universes are all intertwined in
cohesive.
a cohesive whole? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I have an advantage of the lore, the unreliability and confusion is just inherently part of these universes. Like that's built into it. So there's an advantage where like I write a lot of found documents, for example, and I post them on Reddit sometimes. And they're just inherently unreliable. So it'll be a document about like some weird phenomenon of like a repeating pattern that you find in Old House, but the person writing it, you don't even know who this person is, and they could be completely making it up. They could be mistaken, and so that helps me just kind of go crazy and go wild because I'm not tied down to like a hard coded
Yeah.
thing because the confusion and the misinformation and the as it really is if you go to any UFO forum it's just like or any paranormal forum it's people with all these competing theories. There's people that think it's complete bullshit. There's people that stake their entire life on it. UAPs and UFOs in particular, it's just like you have people that are like this entire thing is a government psyop, and then you have people saying no, aliens have been here for thousands of years, and like it's just that is inherently kind of the information, the misinformation and unreliability is baked into it. So even though I do have a cohesive thing in my head, I'm allowed to really play around in that space because that's just it's just a feature of how it is, you know.
Uh-huh. And writing The Caretaker, I mean, obviously, you must be you must be really exciting for you to see what readers come up with connecting this one to that one. Whilst you were writing The Caretaker, did you specifically kind of create certain, I don't know, Easter eggs or certain kind of red herrings, maybe specifically to kind of throw your readers off a little bit and see what they can come up with when it comes out?
Yeah, definitely. I try to avoid if I'm going to draw a very explicit connection, I make sure that I have a reason for it in my head, even if that reason may never be revealed. I like I like to have some intentionality. And that's something I've shifted on. In the past, I would just kind of like, I think this image is cool. I'm just going to throw it out there and figure it out later. And that's
Yeah.
totally fine to do. But now I'm kind of like, I'm trying to be like, if I'm going to do some weird image, I want to have, like, if somebody held me at gunpoint, which please, not encouraging anyone to do that, but if they did, I would be able to provide them some kind of answer to be like, well, this is why. This is why, for instance, this is why in We Used to Live Here, there's a bunch of ants. There's actually a lore background reason for it being ants. And that's become more and more important to me as I continue. And so the connections and the Easter eggs, I like there to be intentionality. I try to avoid, I guess, winking at the camera for the sake of winking. Again, tying back to Marvel or even Star Wars now to some degree, where it'll just be, they'll just throw in like a character in the background that you remember from the old movies, and it's just there just to be, which can be fun. And I don't want to like shit on people having fun, but I'm trying to avoid that as much as I can. And if I am doing a throwback, I want to be intentional about it, to the point where there's actually a bunch of stuff that I ended up deleting from this book because it felt a bit too much like, oh, this is a wink back to We Used to Live Here. So I took it out or dialed it back a lot.
Yeah. But obviously you're promoting this book, but just before I leave you, I mean, obviously this is set in the same universe. So I'm imagining that it's obvious that you're really kind of engrossed in this whole universe. So I'm guessing whatever comes next is probably going to be related as well.
Yeah. When does this podcast air?
This will air just the same week as the book comes out next.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So tomorrow we'll actually be announcing. So this will be public by the time this airs.
Right.
It's a collection of 3 short stories that are going to be like exclusively audio to start.
Right.
And 2 of those stories take place in this universe. And then one of them is just very much more over the top and very, I would say campy to some degree. And so that one it's very much in its own universe. And so that's going to be like an airplane thriller. So it's going to be called Please Remain Seated. And then it's 2 other stories. And I'm really looking forward to that. I'm not sure the exact release date. I think sometime in September.
Is there a specific reason why you've gone with audio first for that one?
I think I get really paranoid when I come up with a title I like Please Remain Seated. I really like that title for an airplane thriller. And so I was messaging my agents being like, I want to get this, how can I get this title out there so people know that I obviously didn't invent that phrase, but I'm like, I want to be the first person that came up with an airplane story called Please Remain Seated. Because in the case of We Used to Live Here, when I had originally written it on Reddit, it was the only story that I was aware of with that title. But then somebody in the meantime had released a book with the same title, and that really admittedly kind of annoyed me a little bit. And so like now I guess that's frankly, that's just the reason. And so my agent thought the fastest way to do that would go the audio route. And yeah, maybe that's a little too inside baseball, but yeah, that's why
it's
audio.
curious you say that, because then you got the Caretaker now, which is Harold Pinter came up with the Caretaker. But
yeah, I guess with that it's a more conventional title. Like I feel less, if it's a one-word title, obviously there's going to be a ton of titles stuff out there. There's a few other books. So there's a fantasy series called Caretaker. So that I'm less. It's when it's like a more, I don't know. It's just my own petty ego. I think it's the short answer of it. Yeah.
So just before I let you go, then I know that you're going on tour and you've got some great people interviewing you, speaking with you. Where can people catch you, and who will you be appearing with? Because you've got some great people.
I'm gonna be in LA with Judy Greer, and on April 21st, and that's super exciting. And then I'm doing events in, oh man, I should have this all in my head, but yeah, it's Portland.
I'll
we'll post it below. But yeah, I'm going to Seattle, Oregon, doing 2 events, actually 3 events now in Oregon. One is still to be announced, but it'll be public by the time this airs. And then I'm going down to Texas, so Houston and Dallas. Yeah. And yeah, I'm super, it's gonna be super fun. And then I'm doing a bunch of events in Canada that are still to be announced, but doing one in my hometown in May, and then a bunch of other ones that are going to be public soon. So
brilliant. So people can get to see you all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, thank you so much for your time, Marcus. Thanks so much for the book. It's fantastic. I'm just as excited as you for it to come out, so I can
see all
read
the
people's opinions and see what they
Cool.
come up with and kind of the connections and stuff. So yeah, I wish you the best of success with the release. I'm sure it's going to go down really well. I loved it to bits, and I hope
Thank
to
you so
speak to you
much.
again about the audio series that you got coming out soon.
Yeah, of course. I would love to.
That'd be great. All right. Thanks so much for your time again. All right. Have a good
My
day.
pleasure.
All right. Cheers
You
then.
too.
Bye now.